Hi, my name is Micah Lane, and we are studying Andersen Opus 33, number 4. As I usually do, I'll play it for you first, and then I'll go back and we can analyze some of the fine details that'll help you play it with more expression and ease. This is number 4. Whew, that's hard. Okay, so obviously, as you heard, throughout the etude we have lots of different accents. What I want to give to you is the difference between a tongued accent and an air accent, a non-tongued accent. If we look at the music, the first measure is an encapsulation of the entire study. We have at the beginning a note that's has an accent and it's at the beginning of a slur. And then the first C at the beginning of the next measure has an accent as well, but it's under a slur. So the note that is at the beginning of a slur is most likely tongue, not always, but in this case, we're going to use this as an opportunity to differentiate between tongue notes and non-tongue notes that are still accented. So the beginning goes tongued with air behind it. And then the next accent is not tongue, but you use a ha articulation. Ha articulation means to use a gust of air that will give that note more volume, but you don't have to disrupt the legato, the smoothness of the phrase. So I went da, ha, da. Got it? Da, ha, da. Some notes are accented with tongue articulation. Some notes are not accented with tongue. Instead, with an air articulation, what we call ha. Okay. Now, the next part that's very, very difficult is the evenness of the 16th notes. As you heard when I played, not everything was perfectly in time. And you're going to struggle with this. Sometime in your flute life, usually in the beginning when we're practicing a whole lot, you have indispensable time to work on these things. As you grow up, as life changes, as you start to have a family, as you have different things in your work life, you have to manage your time very, very carefully. And one of the qualities of a great flute player is to have your notes to be under your control, nice and even. It's all too easy to have the weakness of evenness in 16th notes come out in this etude. As you heard, not all of my notes were perfectly even. Now, if we go too extreme, too even, then the piece sounds robotic. We don't have time, we don't have the expression in the music. Certain music shouldn't should have an ebb and a flow of tempo and of rhythm. And other pieces should be very, very strictly metronomic. It depends on the composer and it depends upon what you want to communicate. But this is a study, and this is our time in our practice room. So my goal for you is to work on making sure these 8/16 notes are as even as possible. As you become more familiar with it, or on your second round of playing through the piece, you can explore with more nuanced use of rubato time, stolen time. First things first, we have to get our fingers even. Some of the combinations are extraordinarily difficult to get even on our instrument. For example, when we have the crescendo that's marked in our etude, in this section, before we get to A minor again, we have to use the G sharp a lot. And that combination of pushing down your pinky and coordinating that is often very difficult. I want you to hone in to this specific section of the piece and work on it with practice rhythms. Remember from our previous video, practice rhythm means to alter the rhythm of the even 16th notes to exercise the pushing down of a key and the lifting action of the key. To do this is a different set of muscles. Most of the muscles that control our fingers are here in the forearm. You can think of them as like a marionette string. When it pulls like this, then the finger goes up. When it relaxes, it goes down again. This is an oversimplification. Obviously, I'm not a medical physician, but this is the general idea. And so sometimes we get a lot of practice pushing down, but not the same amount of practice pulling up. And so this idea of practice rhythms, of doing a long, short, and then a short, long rhythm with even 16th notes, helps us exercise that movement in a more isometric way, in a more even way. So you might want to consider and its opposite. Another thing I notice, if it didn't catch your eye, my pinky today seems to be sporadic all over the place. I remember when I was a younger man that I used to pay very close attention to my pinky being on the flute. I even practiced for a time trying to see if I could play an entire etude in this book without having my pinky lift off of the G sharp key. It's a very, very cool exercise. It's not always appropriate. As you get older and older in your life, you'll have different opinions about what works and what doesn't work. But if you've never tried it before, you might want to keep your fingers as close to the keys as possible. This will minimize extraneous movement that will distract from maybe a more difficult part that comes up later. So practice rhythms will help you do that. The dynamics underneath all of this technical finger stuff are the secret to the expression of the piece. As you see, if we take away the 16th notes on the one E and the E and parts, the subdivided parts, and only play the first note of the major beats, you hear a skeleton of the piece. You begin to hear a melody. It's a beautiful melody. That should be heard underneath or over all of the other 16th notes. If we were to divide the importance of notes, I would say the first notes of the slurs need to be a dynamic or half a dynamic higher than all of the rest of them, so that our ear, as an audience member, can listen to that secret melody while still being able to hear all of the beautiful variation of the other 16th notes. Becomes understand? Compound line. Two things happening at the same time. So, another thing I'd like to talk about is one of the more difficult things, the very long crescendo that we have at the beginning. Well, throughout the piece, actually. If you observe all of those, it makes the music very interesting. My suggestion is to first play the skeleton. And then go back and add the 16th notes, but still try to achieve that simple and beautiful phrase that you created with just the shorter notes. We have, when we get to that G sharp, the E arpeggio part, going back to A, we have difficulty with our fingers, but still strive to get all of the crescendo underneath and to create that beautiful phrase. Here's the simplified version. So underneath that, and when we reach there, we can just let it rip dynamically. Forte, forte, forte. Still strive to have the accents, but fill out the other 16th notes so that it gives the entire group of 16th notes this feeling of forte. We've arrived at the top of our crescendo before we taper off into the beautiful diminuendo. So all of that. And then we finally have the diminuendo. And then back to the original melody. And you can have fun with whatever speed that you want. Remember, 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 speed is nothing without expression underneath. I hope this video helped you. Good luck with this week's Andersen Opus 33, number 4. Happy practicing. Take care.